Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I want to take you deep into a true story. The kind of story that makes you question everything about power, hope, and what it really means to stand for something. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, a name you may not know well, but one that deserves to be told. Ibrahim Traoré was born on March 14, 1988, in a small village called Kera, deep in the dusty heartland of Burkina Faso. His childhood was simple, maybe even painfully simple. Dirt roads, evenings under kerosene lamps, and the smell of red clay after the rain. In that village, dreams rarely escaped the pull of the earth. But somehow, Ibrahim's dreams did. His father was a local teacher, a proud man who believed that education could change everything. His mother was a market woman, carrying woven baskets heavy with mangoes and millet on her head each day, working from sunrise until the last light disappeared behind the baobab trees. Their home was poor, but there was pride, a pride rooted in the stories of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of the 1980s, whose memory was still alive in every whispered conversation about freedom. Traoré grew up hearing Sankara's words replayed like gospel. The revolution is about freeing ourselves from mental slavery. And the boy listened. He listened hard. He studied harder. His father demanded nothing less, telling him, "If you want to change the world, you must first change yourself." Those words stuck like a tattoo on his heart. When he turned 20, Traoré left for the University of Ouagadougou, majoring in geology. He was smart, disciplined, and never forgot the faces of the villagers who looked up to him, hoping he might one day bring something better back. And he was on track to do just that. His grades were excellent, and professors respected him. But outside the classroom, his heart was restless. Burkina Faso was bleeding under terrorist attacks, corrupt politicians, and a broken economy. Traoré couldn't stand by, reading geology textbooks, while children in his village were dying. That's when he made a choice that would change his life forever. In 2009, while still finishing his degree, he signed up for military training. Many of his friends called him crazy. They said, "Why would you trade rocks for bullets?" But he had no answer, other than the quiet burn of a mission that was growing inside him. In the military, he showed discipline, courage, and leadership. He trained in Morocco, learning air defense tactics, then went to Mali with the UN's MINUSMA mission to fight jihadists. There, in the brutal desert, he learned how to stay alive, and more importantly, how to lead. Stories from his unit talk about how Traoré would walk alongside the soldiers, refusing special treatment, refusing even a proper officer's tent. He slept in the dirt, sharing their pain, their malaria pills, and their stale bread. To the men around him, he wasn't a distant officer. He was one of them, and they followed him because he bled just like they did. But the war back home was getting worse. Villages were massacred by extremists. Politicians stole aid money meant for victims. Thousands fled their homes. Burkina Faso was falling apart, piece by piece, like a crumbling clay wall after a heavy rain. Traoré watched helplessly as his country tore itself to pieces. The government at the time, under President Roch-Marc Kabore, seemed paralyzed. Then came Paul-Henri Damiba, a military officer who staged a coup in early 2022, promising to fix everything. But within months, the country was still burning. Attacks were growing worse, and Damiba was accused of protecting his own power instead of the people. Something inside Traoré snapped. The stories of Sankara, the lessons of sacrifice, the faces of villagers haunted him until he could not sleep. He gathered a small circle of loyal soldiers, men who had bled beside him in Mali, and shared a dangerous plan to take down Damiba. Another coup inside the coup, a betrayal to some, a heroic rescue mission to others. He moved quickly, decisively, with the same clarity that had saved his men in battle. September 2022. In a dramatic night assault, Traoré and his team took control of the presidential palace. There was no drawn-out civil war. It was surgical, precise. The nation woke up to a new ruler, a new face, a young captain barely 34 years old promising a second revolution, inspired by Sankara's ideals. On television, Traoré spoke with a calm but determined voice, telling the world, "We will no longer accept a country eaten alive by terror. We will fight back." For many Burkinabe, it was a miracle. They called him Le Capitaine du Peuple, the people's captain. Crowds poured into the streets, waving flags, chanting his name, celebrating like a dark cloud had finally lifted. For the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel so impossible. They believed this young man could finish what Thomas Sankara started. But every revolution plants the seeds of its own tragedy. Even as Traoré took his oath as transitional president, new enemies were already closing in. Warlords, corrupt elites, and extremist groups who would do anything to hold on to their power. He was about to learn that winning a coup was easy. Keeping a broken country together? That would be a different war entirely. The sun rose over Ouagadougou on that October morning, painting the city in a pale, almost fragile light. Ibrahim Traoré stood in his new office, a place still heavy with the scent of fear and stale power. The marble floors gleamed, but the walls seemed to whisper, a reminder that his rise had not come through an election, but through force. That truth would never leave him. He gathered his closest allies, men who had stood beside him in the desert, men who still called him captain instead of president. He needed their loyalty now, more than ever. His first act was to reorganize the army, to root out officers who might betray him as easily as he had betrayed Damiba. In politics, there was no such thing as absolute trust. The people celebrated him, pouring into the streets, dancing with a kind of reckless hope. They called him their savior, a second Sankara, a young lion with a fearless heart. But beneath the cheers, a darker current pulsed. Terrorist attacks did not magically disappear because a new flag was hoisted. Rural communities still burned. Women and children still fled from gunfire. And food was running short in dozens of provinces cut off by violence. Traoré faced an impossible puzzle. On one side, foreign partners, especially France, demanded quick elections and democratic reforms. On the other side, his soldiers demanded weapons, more men, and permission to fight with no mercy. And somewhere in the middle, the desperate people just wanted peace, no matter the price. He chose the path that seemed most urgent: security. He refused to hold elections until the terrorists were defeated. He formed special rapid reaction brigades. He reached out to Russia and Turkey for drones, advisors, and cheaper weapons. Then he ordered a campaign to arm local militias, civilian volunteers who would protect their own villages with rusty old Kalashnikovs and courage alone. To his supporters, these were bold moves. To his critics, they were dangerous, even reckless. But Traoré had no time to please critics. Every day, there were new attacks. Churches burned, marketplaces bombed, entire families kidnapped. When you are drowning, you don't debate the color of the lifeboat. His father visited him in the presidential compound, the same humble man who once taught a village school. The old man looked around at the polished marble, the gold-stitched flags, and sighed. "Do you still recognize yourself, Ibrahim?" he asked quietly. Traoré could not answer. There were nights he barely recognized the face in the mirror, the haunted eyes, the sleepless rage, the burden of so many dead. Every name, every village on a casualty list felt personal. He had sworn to protect them, and still they were dying. Outside the capital, warlords and criminals saw an opportunity. They started kidnapping aid workers for ransom, smuggling weapons across borders and exploiting the chaos. Meanwhile, international human rights groups began to warn about civilian abuses, forced conscription, and rising authoritarian control. In his speeches, Traoré tried to hold on to his dream. He reminded people of Sankara, of the revolution, of freedom from foreign influence. But each speech felt harder than the last. Because in the real world, ideology alone could not stop a bullet. By the middle of 2023, the country was more divided than ever. Some villagers worshipped him as a hero, while others accused him of becoming a tyrant. Soldiers patrolled the roads with nervous fingers on triggers, searching every passing motorbike. Neighbors turned on each other, whispering accusations of spying. Traoré had begun a war, but it was not just against terrorism. It was a war against despair itself. And slowly, it was swallowing him too. He still believed he could succeed, that maybe, just maybe, if he pushed hard enough, long enough, he could force peace back into this wounded land. But deep down, in his loneliest hours, he feared he was no different from those who came before, just another strong man in a uniform, claiming to save his people, while delivering them more chaos. The revolution had made him a hero. The reality might break him. And somewhere, far away in a silent village, a new child would hear stories of this young captain who had tried to be Sankara reborn. They would wonder years from now if Ibrahim Traoré was a hero, or just the tragic echo of a dream that had died long before he was born.